Hey everyone, this is Six Path Weeb. Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into what if Naruko and Obito led the revolution? Part 2. In the last part, we explored how their alliance could reshape the shinobi world, but this time, we're taking it even deeper, uncovering the choices, sacrifices, and unexpected outcomes that could change everything. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is for entertainment and discussion purposes only. I do not own any of the anime footage used in my videos. All rights and credits belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's get into it. Uchiha Obito. Reluctantly, Obito turned his gaze toward the man who had spoken, Uchiha Fugaku. He appeared just as stern and disciplined as Obito remembered, composed, dignified, and ever serious. Uchiha-sama, Obito greeted softly. His voice was calm but carried a slight tremor, enough to show respect without losing composure. The two shared a steady, unreadable stare. Obito could tell that Fugaku was carefully evaluating him, measuring his presence, his intent, and perhaps the truth behind recent rumors. Obito briefly wondered how much the clan leader already knew and whether the latest developments would lead the Uchiha clan to approach him again, either to reclaim him as one of their own or to keep him at a cautious distance. In truth, he would not mind either outcome. At least, in the first case, he could face their judgment with clarity and purpose. It was only when Minato cleared his throat gently that Fugaku seemed to recall his purpose for being there. "I've heard that you've awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan," he said at last. Ah, so that was how much he knew. Obito's eyes shifted briefly to Minato, who wore a faintly apologetic look. Obito held no resentment toward him. Minato's knowledge of the Uchiha's techniques was limited, and sharing the information with Fugaku, the clan head, was both reasonable and responsible. It reflected Minato's integrity and sense of care, qualities that Obito respected deeply. If Fugaku hadn't been present, Obito might have even offered him a grateful hug. Perhaps. If he were truly his physical age and not, in some inexplicable way, an adult mind in a 12-year-old's body. "Yes, I have," Obito answered evenly, with no desire to elaborate. He caught the slight twitch of Fugaku's brow but remained calm. "When did you first activate your Sharingan?" Fugaku asked, his tone measured, "and how did you awaken the Mangekyo? You do realize that it's manifestation." "Actually, I do understand the process, Uchiha-sama," Obito interjected respectfully. Both Minato and Fugaku stiffened slightly, but Obito continued, steady and composed. "It was a gradual occurrence. I've been experiencing vivid dreams, almost like visions, of being placed in difficult situations where I had to protect others, the village, the clan, and my teammates. Recently, one of those dreams became so intense that I believe it triggered the awakening of the Mangekyo Sharingan." Fugaku crossed his arms, studying him with sharp eyes. "That seems unlikely. A simple dream would not be sufficient to cause such an evolution of the Sharingan. If you knew the true nature of our dojutsu, you would understand that." Obito maintained his calm expression. "With respect, Uchiha-sama, the Sharingan may not follow a single, rigid rule. Its awakening comes not from a single act, but from the strength of the mind and the emotions tied to what one experiences. My dreams were exceptionally vivid, so much so that they felt real. Perhaps the mental strain was enough to stimulate the change." Fugaku opened his mouth to counter, but Obito gently raised a hand, signaling for a pause. Surprisingly, the clan leader complied, though a faint hint of irritation flickered across his features. "How else can it be explained?" Obito asked calmly. "I possess these eyes, and you can see they have fully matured. I have not witnessed any tragedy, nor has anyone dear to me been harmed. My teammates are alive and well. Therefore, it stands to reason that this was an emotional and psychological phenomenon rather than a reaction to loss." Inwardly, Obito knew that his explanation wasn't entirely accurate. While emotional strain could indeed trigger the Sharingan, a dream alone was rarely sufficient. But the Uchiha clan, proud as they were, would never admit uncertainty or seek outside assistance from another clan such as the Yamanaka. And in this case, Obito was grateful for that pride. "Regardless," Fugaku said, exhaling slowly, "the fact remains, you have awakened and mastered the Sharingan to its highest level. The clan will want an explanation, and I doubt they will readily accept such an account, especially from someone who possessed no such ability only a short while ago." Obito's eyes widened slightly, though the motion was subtle enough to go unnoticed. Fugaku was speaking to him as though they were equals. There was no sense of superiority or authority in his tone, only calm acknowledgement. Perhaps Minato's presence contributed to that atmosphere, but the trust Fugaku displayed did not escape the young Uchiha's notice. "I understand that," Obito began carefully, glancing between his sensei and the clan head. However, I must remind you that it was the clan that distanced itself from me, not the other way around. I have no intention of returning simply because my Sharingan has matured. My value shouldn't depend on that. A faint, nearly invisible flicker of emotion crossed Fugaku's face before vanishing. He turned toward Minato, who had remained silent up to that point, and spoke with measured calm. Minato, may I ask you to step outside for a moment? I apologize, but this part of the discussion is best kept within the Uchiha clan. Minato nodded politely. Of course, he replied before leaving the room. Once his chakra presence had faded into the distance, Fugaku exhaled softly and turned back to Obito. Tell me, what is it that you truly wish for? Obito hesitated, surprised once again. Perhaps Itachi's father was not the cold man he had once believed. Pushing that thought aside for the moment, Obito answered firmly, I prefer to remain as the clan's outsider. I don't wish to be reintegrated or connected to the political matters of the clan. I simply want to live quietly, apart from those who seek only authority. Fugaku gave a faint smile, a rare sign of amusement, and Obito's lips twitched upward in return. It seemed even the clan head had little patience for the more ambitious elders. I have a proposal, Fugaku said calmly. Obito's expression grew thoughtful. A proposal? Yes, Fugaku confirmed. I'm afraid that the elders already know about your Sharingan, its full development with 3 Tomoe. However, they do not yet know about your Mangekyo abilities. Obito nodded. That much was expected. When it came to visual prowess, the Uchiha clan paid close attention to detail. Then I suppose I have you to thank for keeping that secret, Uchiha-sama. Surprisingly, Fugaku shook his head. No. It was Minato's request. After the incident at the hospital, he asked me to keep the nature of your eyes confidential. Obito exhaled slowly, recognizing where this was going. I see. You're willing to keep the secret, but in return, you want something. What is it you're asking for? Fugaku's gaze softened. I would like you to train my son. Obito blinked. You mean Uchiha Itachi, correct? Fugaku nodded. Obito tilted his head, puzzled. Itachi is only 3 years old, the clan's heir, no less. I'm still viewed as the outsider. Surely, you understand the contradiction in that. The offer still stands, Fugaku said evenly. But it will not remain open forever. The decision is yours. After a pause, Obito gave a faint smile. Very well. I accept. But I must ask, why me? Fugaku's tone remained unreadable. Why is not the concern here? We have an understanding. With that, he turned to leave. Just before stepping out, he paused and added, naturally, you won't begin the training immediately. I'll let you know when the time comes. As he exited, Obito called after him with a hint of good humor, I would have trained him anyway. And it was true, Itachi was one of the few Uchiha members he genuinely admired. Spending time guiding the boy's potential would be worthwhile. When Fugaku's chakra signature came to rest near Minato's, Obito used his Kamui technique to focus on their conversation. It required delicate control, but he had long since mastered it. Fugaku? Minato's voice was calm, though tinged with concern. What happened? How did it go? He wishes to remain independent from the clan, Fugaku replied quietly. And I can't say I blame him. In that case, Minato said with a light-hearted tone, allow me to look after Obito. I've already spoken with the Hokage, and he approved, provided that I have the clan's consent. Minato, Fugaku sighed. I'll do my best to keep the elders from interfering, but they may not approve. That's all right, Minato replied warmly. I can handle a few disagreements. Fugaku's tone turned serious once again. The matter of his Mangekyo must remain between us, your team, and myself. If it were to become public, it could cause unnecessary trouble. Understood, Minato said firmly. The conversation ended shortly after, and Obito released his Kamui, letting his chakra settle. Obito? Came a familiar voice from behind. Naruko stepped into the room, her bright blue eyes filled with curiosity and concern. Is everything all right? Obito smiled faintly. Yes, Naruko. Everything's fine. His eyes shifted toward the slowly opening door, revealing Minato standing there with a gentle, slightly nervous smile. Obito couldn't help but watch him closely, taking in every expression and movement. It had been so many years since he had last seen Minato, alive and well, at least, and his last clear memory of him was from the night of Naruko's birth. Minato rubbed the back of his head, realizing that Obito's intense gaze might have made him uneasy. Since you'll be staying here for a while, You'll probably need some new clothes. Like I mentioned before, only the picture could be recovered. At Obito's startled expression, Minato quickly added reassuringly, "It's over there on the nightstand." Obito turned his head to look. There, resting in a simple birch frame, was the picture. Relief washed over him at the sight. When he turned back, Minato was holding out his hand, placing something soft and small in Obito's palm. When Minato stepped back, Obito found himself staring at a bright green, frog-shaped wallet, an unmistakable reminder of Naruko. "We should go shopping soon," Minato said kindly. "Are you feeling well enough to walk around?" Obito stretched his legs experimentally and rolled his shoulders. His body was still a little sore, but there was no lasting pain. After a deep breath, he stood up and walked past Minato before speaking softly. "Minato-sensei. Could you give me a little time alone? I'll be back before sunset. I just need to clear my thoughts." If Minato was concerned, he didn't show it. From the corner of his eye, Obito could see only a trace of worry on the man's face, hidden beneath his calm composure. "All right," Minato sighed gently. "Just be careful, okay?" Obito nodded. "Thank you, sensei. I'll be fine." He just needed some time to gather himself, to think, to feel like his old self again. Without another word, he left the room and walked toward the bustling streets of Konoha. As Obito made his way down a familiar lane, he froze at a sight that stirred memories deep within him. He had always respected his elders as a child, especially one kind woman he had affectionately called Hana Obachan. She was like a grandmother to him. Whenever she needed help, carrying groceries, watering her plants, or simply walking across the street, he was there without being asked. Helping her had become second nature. Now, standing before him once again, was Hana Obachan, this time sitting on the ground, wincing softly in discomfort. For a brief moment, Obito hesitated. Part of him wanted to turn away, to avoid the pain of remembering. But another part of him, the part that had once been kind, hopeful, and full of heart, refused to let him ignore her. He remembered a time when she had fallen before, and he had carried her to the hospital without a second thought. That was who he used to be, someone who cared deeply for others. Somewhere along the way, he had lost that version of himself, and now, seeing her again, he felt uncertain whether he even deserved to return to that life. "Obito-kun?" Her voice was weak but gentle. Even with her eyes closed, her hand reached out in his direction, as though sensing his presence. Obito felt his chest tighten. She still remembered him. Her hand trembled slightly, and though she was clearly in pain, she managed a faint smile. "Obito-kun. Is that you?" At that, Obito's resolve softened completely. Without another moment's hesitation, he hurried to her side and gently lifted her onto his back. "Hang on, Hana Obachan," he said quietly. "Let's get you some help." He adjusted his grip carefully, making sure she was comfortable, and began walking toward the hospital, his heart lighter than it had been in years. She stood by the hospital bed, gazing silently at the resting woman before her. Obito had managed to bring Hana to the hospital just in time, as the strain on her body had nearly overwhelmed her. Any further delay, and the exhaustion might have proven too severe for her to endure. His expression tightened. When he had first believed that Hana was gone, and that it had been his fault, he had felt nothing. No sorrow, no regret. That detachment, he realized later, had been part of the emotional wall he had built to protect himself from collapsing under the weight of his own actions. Back then, the dream of a new world had been the only thing keeping him moving forward. At that time, he had been Toby. Obito released a quiet sigh as he stepped out of the room. Now, he was Uchiha Obito. But also not entirely. After his encounter with Naruko, he had finally accepted who he truly was, thanks to her unwavering determination to reach him. It had taken time, Naruko's words, his resistance, and her firm persistence, but eventually, he had accepted the truth. When he finally did, it felt as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his heart. For the first time in years, he felt free. Yes, he was Uchiha Obito, and he had made peace with that truth. Even though the Uchiha name carried with it a complicated legacy, he could not deny that it was a part of him. When he had lost his way and turned toward Madara's plan, the name Uchiha Obito had felt empty. He had buried that identity beneath the mask of Toby, becoming nothing more than a shadow of his former self. Without Rin, he had convinced himself that living in that painful world wasn't worth it. But Naruko had changed that. She had given his name a renewed purpose, reminding him that he could still walk toward the light. For that, he owed her deeply, not just for finding him, but for guiding him back to who he truly was. Yet, even now, it wasn't easy. The Uchiha clan was alive, His old team was here, and though he carried the same name, he wasn't the Obito they remembered. The meaning Naruko had given his name was something personal, something these people could not understand. It had been simpler when he was Toby. That name had belonged to no one but him. It wasn't tied to a clan or a past, it was a mask, yes, but also a form of freedom. People thought the cheerfulness he displayed as Toby was a false act, but in truth, it had been the closest thing to happiness he could manage back then. Even if it was artificial, it had been his. Perhaps it wasn't surprising. For someone once willing to trade the real world for an illusion shaped by dreams, settling for false happiness wasn't such a strange choice. Toby was both his escape and his burden, a name that carried the memory of his mistakes and the lessons that followed. He was Uchiha Obito now, thanks to Naruko, but the shadow of Toby would always linger as a reminder of the darkness he had overcome. Obito let out a small laugh under his breath. Maybe that was why he couldn't feel entirely at peace, even with this strange second chance. He was here, with Kakashi, with Minato, with Rin, but something inside him still felt unsettled. His younger self would have cherished this chance and worked tirelessly to protect everyone he cared for. Even his former self, Toby, might have embraced it in his own misguided way. So why couldn't he? Was it guilt? Perhaps it was the guilt that this world's Obito had never known, the weight of choices made and paths lost. He found himself caught between two extremes, the hopeful, idealistic boy he once was, and the disillusioned man he had become. These two parts of him tugged in opposite directions, leaving him suspended in uncertainty. A part of him believed that the dream world would have been simpler. Another part understood that it would never have been real, and that he should be grateful for this chance to make things right. But in truth, he didn't know what to feel. He was confused, restless, and simply wanted some peace. It was an odd, almost poetic irony. He carried the memories of Toby and the heart of Uchiha Obito, both incomplete without the other. He could no longer hide from reality, nor could he ignore the value of others' lives. He had learned that even small moments mattered, that each person's light was precious and irreplaceable. He was no longer the man who could dismiss others as mere afterthoughts. He wasn't the naive boy he once was either. He was something in between, Uchiha Obito, standing at a crossroads between who he had been and who he could still become. Something bright in the corner of his vision pulled him from his thoughts. Looking up, he realized he was in the middle of the bustling marketplace. He blinked in confusion. When had he wandered here? He must have walked while lost in thought. The source of the color caught his eye, a spiral pattern on an orange mask, vivid and familiar. Despite himself, he smiled faintly. He had always liked the color orange, especially after meeting Naruko. Without hesitation, he approached the stall and purchased the mask. It was a small, sentimental act, but one that felt meaningful. His gaze then fell on a pair of goggles nearby, similar to his old ones, though sleeker, with black straps and orange-tinted lenses. They felt right. With a quiet sense of contentment, Obito paid for both and left the shop. Perhaps a little change in appearance, and a fresh start, was exactly what he needed. A second chance. The sun dipped gently toward the horizon, painting the late afternoon sky in soft shades of gold and crimson. Obito arrived at Minato and Kushina's cozy apartment, and before he could even knock, the door opened to reveal a rather flustered Minato. For a brief moment, they simply stared at one another, Obito, his hand raised mid-knock, and Minato, frozen in place with his hand still gripping the doorknob, his eyes wide and uncertain. The young Uchiha tilted his head slightly. "Minato-sensei?" Minato blinked several times before stepping back with an awkward laugh. "Ah, sorry about that. I guess my mind wandered for a moment." Obito nodded slowly, understanding that Minato's thoughts were still clouded by what had happened at the hospital earlier. "Can we talk?" Minato asked, motioning toward the living room couch. Obito gave a small shrug and followed. Once seated, he watched with mild fascination as Minato fidgeted, Minato namikaze, the calm and confident yellow flash, visibly unsure of how to begin. Finally, Obito decided to help him out. "It's about what happened, isn't it?" he asked gently. Minato hesitated before letting out a quiet sigh. His expression softened as he ran a hand through his golden hair. "Obito, I want you to be honest with me. Is there something on your mind you'd like to share?" Obito blinked in surprise. Talking about feelings was never easy for him, especially when all he wanted was to forget the past and move forward. Sensing his hesitation, Minato offered a reassuring smile. "You don't have to explain everything. Just know that you're not alone. You're part of Team 7, and that makes you family. I want you to trust me." Obito felt the weight of Minato's gaze, steady, compassionate, and filled with quiet strength. For a moment, He remembered the teacher he had once known, wise, patient, and endlessly kind. Though Obito now carried the experiences of someone older, his respect for Minato had never wavered. "Sensei," he murmured softly. Then, after a pause, "May I see your hand?" Minato looked puzzled but complied, extending his hand. Obito took it gently in both of his own, tracing the lines across Minato's palm. His sensei's hands were firm and calloused yet warm, hands that spoke of dedication, training, and care. He didn't realize tears were welling in his eyes until Minato drew him into a comforting embrace, one hand resting on his shoulder. How long had it been since he had felt this kind of warmth? The simple comfort of someone's presence, the reassurance of being cared for? The emotion rose within him, bittersweet and overwhelming, and a quiet laugh slipped out, mingled with a soft sob. Minato and Naruko were so similar in spirit, their optimism, their kindness, their ability to reach people's hearts. Naruko had once guided Obito back toward the light, and now Minato was doing the same. Yes, he was living in the past now. At first, it had felt like a punishment, a confusing twist of fate. But sitting there, surrounded by people who cared, Obito realized something important: this was a second chance. He could make better choices. He could help protect those who deserved peace and happiness. He could rebuild, learn, and live again. Obito held onto that warmth for a little longer, allowing the tears to fall freely. For the first time in many years, he felt at ease, at home. "I'm home," he whispered with a small, genuine smile. "I'm finally home." Minato stood before the grand gates, feeling somewhat uncertain, not lost in direction, but rather in thought. Only a few days had passed since the recent fire incident, and ever since Obito had awakened, everything seemed to spiral into confusion. It wasn't unreasonable that he had frozen for a moment in astonishment. Kakashi had been equally stunned, Rin had grown emotional, and Obito remained unconscious. The surprise of Obito's Sharingan activating was one thing, but what followed was even more bewildering. When the three tomoe of the Sharingan began to swirl into an unfamiliar pinwheel pattern, a strange wave of energy appeared before quickly fading as Obito fainted. Despite all that occurred, one thought repeated in Minato's mind: what exactly happened to him? Minato did not know much about the Sharingan beyond what was publicly known. The eye could predict movements, grant remarkable perception, and progress through 3 stages of development. The stronger the Uchiha heritage, the greater the potential for activation. However, the ability was said to awaken only under great emotional pressure. He worried deeply for his student. To have reached such an advanced stage of the Sharingan meant Obito must have experienced something emotionally intense. Minato was troubled, especially after hearing Obito's disoriented words about not belonging here and everything being an illusion. Could it have been a genjutsu? Minato pondered. That would make sense, although few illusionary techniques were capable of affecting an Uchiha, given their natural resistance and keen mastery of such arts. Shaking his head, Minato decided he needed answers. Taking a calming breath, he knocked firmly on the great doors of the Uchiha compound. There was only one person he trusted enough to discuss this matter with, Uchiha Fugaku. What did you say? Fugaku's usually composed voice rose sharply, the sound echoing through the room as his teacup slipped from his grasp and shattered upon the floor. Minato had never seen the Uchiha leader so unsettled. You heard me, Minato replied carefully, keeping his tone calm. But why does this concern you so greatly? You didn't react until I mentioned the unusual flames. Fugaku sighed heavily before sitting down again, visibly conflicted. Describe his eyes, he finally said. Minato blinked in surprise. His eyes? Yes. They were not the ordinary tomoe, were they? No, Minato admitted. The question confirmed that something deeper was at play, something hidden within the Uchiha's traditions. After a moment's hesitation, Fugaku spoke in a quiet, serious voice. What you witnessed was the Mangekyo Sharingan, the most advanced stage of our clan's dojutsu. The black flames you described are called Amaterasu, one of its rare abilities. Very few in our history have ever reached that stage. Minato listened closely, appreciating Fugaku's honesty. I understand that the Sharingan awakens through emotional strain, he said. How does one awaken the Mangekyo? Fugaku looked troubled. It requires an experience of profound emotional impact, something that deeply affects the user's heart. Minato felt his chest tighten. He could only imagine what Obito might have gone through to trigger such a transformation. The idea saddened him. Power gained through sorrow or hardship was a burden no one should have to bear. It is indeed a difficult truth, Fugaku said quietly. Whatever occurred with Obito must have been intense enough to awaken that level of power. Minato nodded thoughtfully. But none of this makes sense. Obito hasn't been through anything like that recently. I cannot say, Fugaku replied. You know your student better than anyone. But it may be that what he experienced wasn't real at all. Minato's eyes narrowed in concentration. A genjutsu, he murmured. Fugaku looked puzzled. What are you thinking? Minato folded his arms, his expression thoughtful. If what Obito said is true, that everything felt like an illusion, then perhaps he wasn't experiencing reality at all. This revelation left Minato both worried and determined. He would find the truth, for the sake of his student and for the balance of the village. And somewhere beyond the walls of the compound, Naruko Uzumaki, bright and determined as ever, trained diligently, unaware that the mysteries unfolding around her would soon intertwine with her own path. Genjutsu, Minato repeated thoughtfully, his tone deepening with curiosity. Is it possible for the Mangekyo Sharingan to awaken through a particularly strong illusionary experience? Fugaku arched an eyebrow. What exactly are you suggesting? An illusion, perhaps one so powerful that it shows the person something emotionally overwhelming, Minato mused. I remember Obito once saying that everything is an illusion, and he also called us pretenders. He glanced at Fugaku with concern. Do you think that might mean something more? The Uchiha leader rubbed his chin in contemplation. It's not impossible, but it would be very unusual. Even if Obito isn't the most gifted member of the clan, he still carries Uchiha heritage. That gives him a natural resilience to illusions. Sensing Minato's quiet unease, Fugaku added calmly, still, if such a thing is possible, I would ask that we keep this between us. The elders might pursue such power without considering the consequences. The idea itself was unsettling. Both men shivered slightly at the thought of overly ambitious elders chasing strength beyond reason. I should inform the clan elders about this, Fugaku said after a pause. Minato quickly stood, his voice anxious. Wait, please don't tell them everything. Obito is still a child. If they learn about his new ability, they might see him only as a tool rather than a person. He needs understanding, not control. Fugaku raised a hand to reassure him. Don't worry, Minato. I'll only share what's necessary. Perhaps you should talk with Obito personally. Coming from someone who understands both sides might help him find balance. Minato nodded, though a flicker of chakra caught his attention as Fugaku's gaze shifted toward the door. Nanami, he called. Yes, Fugaku-sama, came a polite, feminine voice from beyond the sliding door. You may inform the elders that Uchiha Obito's Sharingan has reached its third stage. Understood, the girl replied softly before her presence faded down the corridor. Once the seal on the room was restored, Fugaku turned back to Minato. Now, as for Obito. His mastery over the Mangekyo seems unusual. Minato frowned. What do you mean? The Amaterasu technique is extremely difficult to control. The dark flames it creates don't behave like ordinary fire. They vanish only when the user wills it, Fugaku explained. Yet Obito managed to stop it almost immediately. That kind of control is rare, especially for someone new to the ability. Minato's eyes widened in astonishment. But the flames disappeared completely, and Obito wasn't hurt at all, only the blanket was slightly burned. Fugaku nodded. Exactly. It suggests he used immense focus and instinct. It might have been unintentional, but it was still remarkable. Do you think he did that subconsciously? Minato asked, puzzled. Perhaps. I believe it was his instinct to protect himself. Despite everything, the boy still wishes to live and move forward, Fugaku said, his tone softening slightly. Relief washed through Minato. That spark of determination meant Obito's true self still remained. Beneath the confusion and pain, there was still hope. We should be going, Fugaku noted, drawing Minato from his thoughts. The blonde nodded and activated his teleportation technique, and in a flash, they arrived at Minato's apartment. When they entered, Obito had already woken up. His gaze was calm but guarded, his Sharingan faintly active. Minato could sense Fugaku's quiet alertness beside him. For a while, no one spoke. Obito's expression flickered with faint emotion before settling into calm neutrality. It was strange for Minato to see his usually cheerful student so distant. Finally, Fugaku broke the silence. Uchiha Obito. Obito turned his gaze toward him respectfully. Fugaku-sama. Another pause filled the room, an unspoken exchange that Minato didn't quite understand. The unspoken language of the Uchiha was a mystery to him. With a discreet cough, Minato encouraged Fugaku to continue. I heard that you have awakened the Mangekyo Sharingan, Fugaku said in his usual composed tone. Obito glanced briefly at Minato, who offered a small, reassuring smile. Understanding flickered in Obito's eyes. Yes, Obito replied quietly. I have. Dash. When did you activate your Sharingan, and how did you awaken the Mangekyo? Fugaku's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. You do not know, but the only way to awaken the... Actually, I do know how the Mangekyo can be awakened, Uchiha-sama, replied Obito calmly. Minato froze for a moment. How could Obito know that? I suppose it happened gradually, Obito continued, his tone distant. I've been having vivid dreams, nightmares, really, about being placed in difficult situations. Situations where the safety of the village, the clan, and my team were at risk. I believe the Mangekyo awakened recently after one of those dreams. Minato glanced at Fugaku, uncertainty flickering in both their expressions. Even the idea of it being genjutsu seemed more believable, but Minato couldn't see why Obito would lie. He also noticed how Obito's way of speaking had changed, his speech was smoother, more precise. Fugaku folded his arms, unimpressed. The Mangekyo cannot be awakened in such a manner. A dream alone would not suffice, and if you truly knew as much as you claim, you would be aware of this. Minato raised an eyebrow. He didn't know everything about the Sharingan, but he wasn't ready to dismiss the possibility entirely. Perhaps it wasn't impossible, just rare. Truthfully, he preferred Obito's explanation over the idea of an illusionist's interference. At least this way, it suggested that Obito hadn't faced any dangerous encounters. Obito's expression remained calm, even slightly detached. Minato worried for the young Uchiha, though he couldn't help but find his composure impressive. Obito showed a quiet confidence, even before someone as authoritative as the clan head. Uchiha-sama, Obito said respectfully, the Sharingan isn't magic. Its awakening isn't tied to loss, it's triggered by strong emotions and mental strain. My dreams felt extraordinarily real, more vivid than any normal vision. That must have been what caused it. When Obito lifted a hand to pause Fugaku's response, Minato nearly gasped. The clan head actually stopped mid-sentence, surprised. The show of quiet assurance from Obito was remarkable. How else would you explain this? Obito continued evenly. My eyes have fully developed, yet I haven't lost anyone close to me. You can see for yourself, my team is safe and well. There's no other logical explanation. Fugaku's shoulders eased slightly, and Minato sensed his frustration. The Uchiha leader was caught between tradition and this new, challenging idea Obito presented. Regardless, Fugaku began, his tone weary, you have indeed awakened and advanced the Sharingan to full maturity. The clan will want an explanation, and they may not easily accept such reasoning from someone who only recently developed it. I understand, Obito said softly, but I must remind you that it was the clan who distanced themselves from me, not the other way around. I have no intention of returning simply because I now possess something they find valuable. The quiet disappointment in his voice did not escape either adult. After a pause, Fugaku turned to Minato. Minato, may I ask you to give us a moment? I apologize, but what I am about to say should remain within the clan. Minato hesitated but nodded. Of course, he murmured, stepping out respectfully. As he walked away, his usual confident posture seemed dimmed. He wasn't thinking about his reputation or titles, only about his student. He missed Obito's cheerful grin, her playful challenges with Kakashi, and even her habit of arriving late with half-true excuses. When he reached the living room, he sank onto the couch, interlacing his fingers as he thought deeply. He was certain that whatever Obito had gone through, it hadn't been a simple dream. The fear, the look in her eyes, it was too real. There had also been something else, a name. When Obito had first awakened, she had murmured a name with such intensity that Minato was sure it meant something important. It might have been someone connected to what she had seen, a person or perhaps a presence she believed responsible. But he couldn't recall the name. It was short, 3 syllables, and he felt it carried an ancient meaning from an old story or legend. Kagura? He whispered. No. That's not it. Sakuya? Sakura? He frowned in frustration. Kazura? Katsura? He sighed, running a hand through his blonde hair. Never in his life had he found it so difficult to recall something so vital. Usually, he was calm under pressure, but this time, his concern for Obito clouded his thoughts. The sound of soft footsteps drew his attention, and he turned quickly. Fugaku? Minato asked, his voice unsteady. How did it go? What did you discuss? Fugaku released a quiet sigh as he stepped around the couch to face the blonde. He wishes to remain independent from the clan. I can't fault him for that. Obito wants to remain separate from the Uchiha clan? Minato mused. It was an unexpected choice. Obito had always seemed eager to show his pride in being an Uchiha. Minato would have thought the young shinobi would welcome the chance to reconnect with his family. Still, he smiled gently. In that case, allow me to keep an eye on Obito. I already spoke with Hokage-sama, and he approved, as long as the Uchiha clan consents. At Fugaku's expression of fatigue, Minato chuckled softly. The clan leader rubbed at his temples, looking weary. The matter regarding the child's mangekyo will remain confidential between your team and me. Ensure your students maintain that secrecy. The consequences of such knowledge spreading would be troublesome. Minato nodded with an easy grin. Understood. Fugaku exhaled once more as though wishing he could simply return home and rest. Minato followed him toward the door to see him off politely. Thank you, Fugaku. I'm not sure what I would have done without your cooperation. The Uchiha waved a hand in dismissal. Think nothing of it. Even if the boy wishes to distance himself from the clan, he remains an Uchiha, and as clan head, I still hold responsibility for him. His eyes narrowed slightly. I will also make certain the elders do not attempt to exploit his abilities. Minato's smile warmed. I'll do my best to guide and protect him. I have no doubt you will. Minato had been quietly concerned. He wanted to trust Obito, yet something deep within him remained unsettled. When he had returned to the guest room earlier, Minato had suggested taking Obito out to buy new clothes. Everything had been lost in the fire. The boy had declined, asking instead for some time alone. Minato, trusting his student, had agreed. Yet as the minutes passed, his worry began to grow. When he finally sensed Obito's familiar chakra signature, still warm but tinged with something faintly distant, he rushed toward the door and opened it quickly. To his relief, Obito was unharmed and even appeared calmer, as though a quiet light had returned to his eyes. The earlier tension seemed to have faded, though Minato knew it might still linger beneath the surface. Minato-sensei? Obito asked, tilting his head curiously. Minato blinked and offered a small, sheepish laugh. Sorry about that. I was just a bit distracted. Obito's suspicious gaze didn't waver, prompting Minato to sigh gently. Can we talk? With a casual shrug, Obito moved to the couch and sat down. Minato followed, sitting across from him, his hands clasped neatly in his lap as he gathered his thoughts. How should I begin? He wondered, uneasily aware of his student's quiet, observing eyes. Minato prided himself on being calm and capable in most situations. As a shinobi, he was regarded as talented and reliable, someone who could always find the right answer. But moments like this reminded him how human he truly was. He was no prodigy, every skill he possessed had been earned through perseverance and dedication. Yet, when it came to matters of the heart and mind, especially those of his students, he often found himself unsure. Before he could find the right words, Obito spoke softly. It's about earlier, isn't it? Minato hesitated, startled by the boy's honesty. Obito looked tired but determined, as if trying to confront whatever weighed on him. Taking a steady breath, Minato met his student's gaze. Obito, he began gently, I want you to be honest with me. Is there anything you'd like to share? You don't need to go into details if you're not ready. Just let me know what's on your mind. You're not only my student, you're part of my team, and that makes you family. He offered a kind smile. I want you to know you can trust me. Obito studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Minato stayed patient, though his heart ached slightly. He couldn't help but think, when did Obito forget how to smile so easily? Finally, Obito's shoulders trembled ever so slightly. In a quiet voice, he asked, Sensei, may I see your hand? The blonde's brow furrowed as she paused, halting the automatic response that had almost escaped her lips. Naruko quietly pondered the reason behind Obito's unusual request but chose to place her trust in him without hesitation. She extended her hand toward the boy once more, observing with gentle amusement as Obito studied the gesture as though he had never encountered such an offering before. He seemed so young and pure, Minato thought to himself, a hint of concern crossing his mind. And yet, something has changed in him. Obito, what could have caused this? Whoever had brought about such a transformation must have left a deep mark, one that Minato wished he could help ease. A few soft droplets landed on Minato's palm, and he blinked in quiet surprise. When he looked closer, he noticed tears beginning to trail down Obito's cheeks. Every instinct urged Minato to react, but he restrained himself, careful not to startle the boy. Whatever was weighing on Obito's heart was clearly significant, his tears said more than any words could. Without hesitation, Minato pulled the young Uchiha into a comforting embrace, his hand gently smoothing down the boy's spiky dark hair. He held him securely yet kindly, offering a quiet space where Obito could let his emotions flow freely. The blonde rested his chin lightly atop the boy's head, his smile softening as he felt Obito's arms tighten in return. It was a rare and humbling moment to see Obito in such a vulnerable state. Not unpleasant, simply eye-opening. Obito was not often known for being emotional or introspective. He was typically full of spirit, mischief, and determination. Yet, behind that cheerful exterior, Minato had always sensed a guarded heart, one that feared rejection and loneliness. And so, seeing Obito open up like this wasn't disheartening, it was meaningful. It showed trust, something precious and fragile. Minato silently vowed that he would never take that trust for granted. His care for his students went far beyond duty or title now. As he gazed ahead into the quiet of the room, he imagined the unseen worries that held Obito captive, and he made a silent promise to help him face them. It's a promise, he thought with quiet determination. Dear YouTube family. That's all for now. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay tuned for more. Until next time, keep exploring the 6 paths. Regards. 6 Path Weeb.